In Part 1, we discussed how the legend and lore of the Michigan Dogman all began. Today in Part 2, we dive into the many strange and documented encounters that people have had with this terrifying cryptid. So turn down the lights and lock your doors. This is Part 2 of the Michigan Dogman, a Great Lakes legend.
The first time it happened, I was sleeping and woke up because I felt a hand on my leg and I realized that I couldn't move.
And he come across this object on the ground which was the shape of a flying saucer. So he jumped out of his pickup and went down there, and there was 4 beings laying on the ground.
When I raised my head back up, I was turning my head, and out of my peripheral vision I seen something hop to a tree. And it was tall, about 7, 8 foot tall, and it was black, real hairy, like a gorilla.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. Today is Sunday, August 5th, and this is episode 23. If you missed part 1, I recommend listening to it before continuing this episode. You can find a link to episode number 22 in the description below. In our last episode, I discussed what many people believe to be the very first sighting of the Michigan Dogman in Wexford County, Michigan. We also talked about the Dogman's description and what eyewitnesses typically report seeing when encountering this creature. Before we begin today's episode, though, I'd like to give special thanks to Steve Cook at WTCM Radio in Traverse City, Michigan. You may recall from episode 22, I talked about Cook's song, The Legend, and how it played a pivotal role in the history of the Michigan Dogman. I reached out to Mr. Cook, and he has given me permission to share his song with all of you.
Summer morning in early June is when the legend began. At a nameless logging camp in Wexford County, where the Manistee River ran, 11 lumberjacks near the Garland Swamp found an animal they thought was a dog. In a playful mood, they chased it around till it ran inside a hollow log. A logger named Johnson grabbed him a stick and poked around inside. Then the thing let out an unearthly scream and came out and stood upright. None of those men ever said very much about whatever happened then. They just packed up their belongings and left that night, were never heard from again. It was 10 years later in '97 when a farmer near Buckley was found. Slumped over his plow, his heart had stopped. There were dog tracks all around. 7 years past the turn of the century, they say a crazy old widow had a dream of dogs that circled her house at night. They walked like men and screamed. In 1917, a sheriff who was out a-walking found a driverless wagon and tracks in the dust like wolves had been a-stalking. Near the roadside, a 4-horse team lay dead with their eyes open wide. When the vet finished up his examination, he said it looked like they died of fright. In '37, a schooner captain said several crew members had reported a pack of wild dogs roaming Bowers Harbor. His story was never recorded. 1957, a man of the cloth found claw marks on an old church door. The newspaper said they'd been made by a dog. He'd had to stood 7'4". In 67, a van load of hippies told a park ranger named Quinlan they'd been awakened in the night by a scratch at the window. There was a dogman looking in and grinning. Then in the summer of 87, near Luther, it happened again. At a cabin in the woods, it looked like maybe someone had tried to break in. There were cuts around the doors could have only been made by very sharp teeth and claws. He didn't wear shoes because he didn't have feet. He walked on just 2 paws. Legends are born of stories told, imagination without restriction. But what does a legend become when the truth outruns the fiction? The decades come, the decades go, people still swear they see. Interlock and Reed City, Mackinac, there was something looking back at me. And somewhere in the Northwoods darkness, a creature walks upright. And the best advice you may ever get is don't go out at night.
What you just heard was Steve Cook's song, The Legend, from 2007. Stay tuned at the end of the show to hear Cook's original version from 1987. The legend of the Dogman has been part of the history and lore of the Great Lakes region for over 130 years. Over the decades, sightings of this creature have stayed constant, yet remain shrouded in mystery. Today, sightings of this creature have spread throughout the United States and around the world, but investigators are still baffled as to what this creature really is, or where it comes from. Explanations of the Dogman's origins vary greatly depending on who you ask. Some believe that they are an alien race that has inhabited our planet for centuries, while others believe that the Dogman is an actual human-dog hybrid. Certain military officials have admitted that these creatures are a type of super soldier, or lab experiment gone awry, some even claiming that they have encountered these creatures and were ordered by their superiors to shoot them on sight. Some theorize that the Dogman is actually an elemental, a supernatural entity that protects and watches over the forests. However unbelievable these theories may seem, we do have to admit that there really is no rational explanation for their existence. From werewolves to skinwalkers, all known variations of such a creature seem purely fictional, yet they are deeply rooted and documented in many cultures. As far back as 3100 BC, the ancient Egyptian god known as Anubis was depicted as a canine or a man with a canine's head. Anubis was associated with mummification and the afterlife, and was also portrayed as a protector of graves. In its earliest depictions, Anubis was described as having a full animal form, with the body and head resembling that of a jackal. In many beliefs, Anubis is revered as the most important god of the dead, and is shown on cave paintings holding the hand of the deceased, leading them to the underworld. If we are to assume that the Dogman and Anubis are connected in one way or another, it would seem that perhaps the Dogman is more of a protective entity than a malevolent one. If this is true, though, how do we explain the majority of eyewitness accounts, which are downright horrifying? Encounters where the witnesses describe feeling an unnatural and primal sense of terror. This first story comes from an eyewitness by the name of Brian, who in 2001 was working as a deputy sheriff.
I got a call. I worked in a rural county for about 50 miles west of D.C. Of an unknown animal disturbance. And our animal control was off duty. So it was like 8:30 at night. And our game wardens, they cover like 2 counties. No one was available. They sent out to the call. It was pretty deep into the county. It was a rural road. Probably took about 20 minutes to get there. I thought it could have been a bear. Our dispatcher wasn't too clear what it was. Inclination was large, possibly a bear in the area. So I had my shotgun, brought it out with me. I knocked on the trailer. There was no other trailers around. It was an older trailer in a real rural area. It wasn't very lit. I made contact with the complainant at the trailer. Basically, it said there was some sort of animal or something near their porch, making a lot of noise, scratching, and wherever the guy said he didn't think it was a bear. I said, what do you think it was? I don't know. It was just really big, and it was not a bear. I only saw it for like a second. He was terrified. I'm very familiar with bears. Most bears are going to run away, make noise, they go away. Going to go scratching on your trailer. There's no garbage or anything like that around. There's nothing right near his trailer. There was no garbage right there. So I asked them to keep everybody inside. If you have any dogs or anything, keep them inside. Where are your closest neighbors? If you had any problems like this before, if you have any guns or anything like that, just keep everything inside. Let me check the area. I'll come back, knock on your door, and announce that I'm there. So I walked around the trailer, didn't see anything. This is probably about 8:30 at night. Pretty sure it was like November. The ground was very hard. There's a wood line probably about 50 feet to the left, almost parallel to the front of their trailer. Probably about 25 feet above that, I heard sound like a really hard rustling of leaves. It was pretty decent visibility with my tail light. I could see the leaves were falling, and I saw this object. Every bit of hair on the back of my neck stood up. Pretty much wasn't believing what I was seeing. It was literally, I lit it up, and it almost absorbed the light of my flashlight at first. It was probably between 8 and 9 feet tall. It was just literally a foot inside the wood line. What I remember the most about it, it had the longest forearms I've ever seen in my entire life. It was black. I saw one pointed ear. Didn't look anything like a bear. It wasn't chunky like a bear. It was extremely wide. As it started to go away from me, I was lighting it up. I noticed it almost had a taper to its back. Didn't notice a tail or anything like that. I just quickly flashed down to the legs. It looked like they were bent like a dog's legs would be. And I just put it right back up. And this thing just kept walking. It didn't slow down, didn't hesitate, didn't turn my way. I lit it right on the side of its face. And it didn't even look at me. It's like I didn't even exist or didn't even care. I have a shotgun in one hand. I'm trying to line it up under my shotgun with one hand, and I got my shotgun in the other hand. So I'm kind of moving it with my shotgun so I can see what I'm firing if I had to. And basically, evidently I lost track of it for a second where it moved fast. I heard leaves rustling, but I lost track of it. I literally walked towards inside the wood line. It was about 45 feet from the trailer. And I was very, very scared at the time. Right. And I didn't see anything. There was bushes in another deeper forested area, probably about 100 feet away from that. It was probably the scariest I've ever been in my entire life. I was so scared. Eventually when I got back to my car, I got extremely nauseous and I couldn't stop shaking. I went back to the trailer. There was no footprints. I've been in the woods. I've worked for environmental conservation in a different state. I didn't see any foot impressions. This thing literally had the longest forearms I've ever seen, and it was like a curled up claw. I noticed that brushing against the tree. That's what scared me more than anything, because it's the way this thing's forearms were. Bears don't look like that. Bears don't walk like that. And like I said, I saw one ear sticking up. It was like a tufted ear. It looked like it was a tufted ear. I can't say it looked like a Doberman like a lot of people say these things were. It was sticking up with a big head, and it had a muzzle. Without exaggeration, it was at least 8 inches long. Brenton, he was parallel to the trailer, but he was probably like maybe 20 feet going away. Yeah. I lit him up. He didn't even care I was there. It was like it didn't even matter. I mean, it was very startling. I'd already racked my shotgun, and my finger was right on the button to take off from safety. I was startled to death. I didn't even think about shooting it, to be honest with you. I was petrified at the thought of shooting it. My biggest fear was it coming back. The biggest thing I've ever seen in my life.
The encounter you just heard was posted on May 7th, 2016, by a YouTube channel called Brenton Sawn Mysteries to Search. Mr. Sawn graciously allowed me to play his interview for you, and I urge all of my listeners to check out his channel. Mysteries to Search offers a lot of great information and eyewitness interviews. See the description below for a link to Mr. Sawn's channel and the full-length interview. As unnerving as Brian's encounter is, it's not the only one of its kind. In fact, it's just one of thousands of eyewitness accounts that describe a similar animal. In her book, The Beast of Bray Road, Linda Godfrey takes an in-depth look at multiple sightings in the early 90s of strange, werewolf-like creatures. These encounters took place in and around Elkhorn, Wisconsin, but eventually made national headlines due to the frequency and strangeness of the accounts. Godfrey's book is a perfect example of how prevalent Dogman sightings are becoming. Each year, the number of sightings increase, and while some of these reports may be false, most of them seem to come from reliable sources, honest people that are seeing something that they just can't explain, something that has shaken them to their very core. On page 154 of The Beast of Bray Road, Godfrey writes that one of her best emailed sightings came from a woman by the name of Kim Del Rio. After receiving the eyewitness's email, Godfrey interviewed Del Rio over the phone in March of 2003. Godfrey refers to this encounter as the werewolf of Old Milwaukee, and I'd like to share the encounter with you now, reading directly from The Beast of Bray Road. Del Rio lived on 50th Street and Wright in Milwaukee. One hot summer day in 1972, when she was 7 years old, she and her mother suddenly heard a neighbor lady screaming, "Help, help, go away, go away." As they ran to see what was happening, they noticed several other neighbors had already gathered to watch the events at the corner house across the street. Their neighbor was standing on her porch, yelling at a strange animal. Del Rio remembers the creature vividly, although other neighbors refused to talk about it, and her mother's memory is vague. The animal was dog-like, but standing on its hind legs. Del Rio said it had a pointy muzzle and dog-like ears that were at the top of its head and erect. Still, she said it wasn't a dog, but it wasn't a monkey either. It was canine. She noticed a long, bushy tail and said its forearms were shorter than the back legs. It wasn't gray like a coyote, she added, but a dark brownish color, with some other color mixed in. It held its paws up in front of it, at its chest, and they were slightly curled. Although the woman was yelling, the thing wouldn't budge. It seemed really discombobulated and confused, said Del Rio. She thinks she may have turned to look at her mother, and when she looked back, it was gone, so she didn't see it run away. Del Rio now thinks it resembled a Gelda baboon, but that was not a baboon. She also thinks it highly resembles some medieval drawings of werewolves. Milwaukee may not seem like a likely place for a sighting like that, but Del Rio noted that her neighborhood was surrounded by parks, many of which had streams running through them. She said she has seen coyotes in the city, and this was no coyote or even a coy dog mix. Del Rio had heard of other sightings in suburban Pewaukee and Brookfield, she added. This next encounter is one of my personal favorites from The Beast of Bray Road, and it's entitled The Snowmobile Watcher. We are moving north this time, in fact almost due north, from Wadsworth past Green Bay, Wisconsin, to Marinette County. The year was 1980, and Marv Kirschnick was spending his Christmas vacation snowmobiling with some buddies. They were based at a cabin near Pembin. Kirschnick, who designs, creates, and sells hand-carved wooden marionettes of characters such as the Frog Prince or Elvis Presley bears, and who owns a bead and gift shop in Williams Bay called Mrs. Beads, has kept pretty quiet about the incident since it happened. He said, "I didn't even tell my good friends." Their vacation was almost over, and the group decided to take one last ride through the wilderness trails, mostly on county forest land, to a restaurant one of the group knew about. The few towns in the area, Amberg, Dunbar, Niagara, are tiny and spaced far apart, surrounded by deep woods. The Menominee River runs nearby. Just to the southwest of Pembin is the Potawatomi Indian Reservation. The adventurers headed out for the Four Seasons Club on Miscano Island, traveling northeast from Pembin on the trails set into 25 feet wide fire breaks, cleared areas chopped away to stop forest fires from spreading. It was pretty cold, said Kirschnick when he told me this story, and they were predicting snow. Still, he and his friends made it to the restaurant without incident. We had a nice dinner, a couple of drinks, and sat by the fire for a while, but we were not drunk. They left the lodge at 1:30 in the afternoon, with 3 inches of fresh snow on the ground to speed their way home. After about 10 minutes of riding, they came to a clear-cut area, and Kirschnick's troubles began. It was so cold I was having trouble with my snowmobile, he explained. His machine stalled at the bottom of a hill, and Kirschnick couldn't immediately get it going again. His buddies, confident that he would get the machine started, decided to plow on ahead without him. So Kirschnick, completely alone in the middle of a vast forest, began pulling on his starter in earnest. I could see their taillights disappearing, and then it got really quiet, he said. I had this feeling of something behind me, and I heard noises 20 feet to my left. I was getting scared because there are bears out here. Kirschnick finally induced his sled's engine to spit out a promising little cough, and he heard the noise to his left again. He yanked one more frantic, heartfelt pull and, with relief, heard the engine roar to life. I jumped on my sled, he said, and just as I got started, I looked to my left once more and saw 2 big yellow eyes looking at me. They were too high up to be a bear. Kirschnick calculated later that they had to be at least 7 feet off the ground. I could make out this big shadow behind the eyes, he said, and as I went by, the eyes followed me. Kirschnick sped off, full throttle all the way, and did not look back. When I got back to the camp, the guys said I looked like I'd seen a ghost, he said. I was shaking. I never did do much snowmobiling after that. Linda Godfrey's many books on strange and unusual creatures are a great place to begin your journey into the unknown. She was kind enough to let me reference the Beast of Bray Road in our show today, and I really appreciate her openness to share what she has learned. She has done years of research in order to bring her readers factual, non-biased, and fun information. I highly recommend checking out her website at lindagodfrey.com. I've added a link in the description below as well. If you enjoy our show, I know you'll love the information on Linda Godfrey's website too. The next eyewitness encounter I want to share with you comes from weekinweird.com, yet again another great website for the strange and unusual. This witness writes, me and 2 friends decided to go camping in southern New York, up in the mountains. There was a dirt road that runs right down the mountain, and then off it are a lot of smaller off-road tracks that have some good camping spots. I don't know if you're really supposed to be camping there or not, but there's a lot of fire pits, so people do it anyway. We set up our tent and got a fire going and had a couple beers. We all looked at each other because the woods got real quiet. You couldn't even hear crickets. Everything just went dead. It felt like there was a lightning storm coming because you could feel the static in the air, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Jamie started saying that he felt like the air was humming, and then all of a sudden there was a real deep bass noise, and this bright light in the distance that flashed up and lit up the whole woods. It looked like the light when a real big firework explodes for the first few seconds, but this lasted probably for a minute before it split up into 3 or 4 other lights and then shot back down into the trees. We could all see the lights glowing out in the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind and it was gone. Everything smelled like it had just rained, but it never did. We didn't know what to do, but figured we would just wait it out, but nothing happened. We thought maybe it could have been a meteor or something, so we left it alone. At about 2 in the morning, we decided to turn in, so Jamie and I went to go sleep in the tent, but Dan said he was going to sleep by the fire. An hour later, I wake up because Dan is in the tent shaking us, saying that there is something big watching the camp. He said it was about 50 feet from the fire, and he thought that it might be a bear, but that it was standing on 2 legs and bobbing back and forth like it was trying to get a better look at him. While he was talking, we heard a loud scream. I've never heard anything like it before as long as I've been alive. It sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but deeper, and so loud it made your ears ring. Next thing I remember was hearing 3 or 4 more things come running toward the campsite, and the embers from the fire kicking up and landing on the tent. These things, or creatures, or whatever they were, kept running up to the tent and grunting and running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or two each time. The tent was collapsing on one side, and we didn't know what else to do, so we just started screaming as loud as we could. It only took a minute, and then everything was quiet again, so we made a run for the truck as fast as we could and hit the gas. When we were leaving, we saw one of those creatures in the headlights standing in the road. I told Jamie to gun it, and the thing straightened up and puffed up its chest. It must have been 8 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over its body except the front. The hair was white or yellow around the chest. Its face looked kind of like a dog, but not really. I know what Bigfoots look like, and this was way different. It didn't even move when we drove at it. We had to swerve around it, or we would have run right over it. We drove back down the mountain to the highway and parked the truck in a gas company parking lot. We were going to tell the cops what happened, but we didn't know if we were camping somewhere we shouldn't be, and we had been drinking all night and can't afford a DUI, so we just waited for the sun to come up and sobered up. When we drove back up to get our stuff, there wasn't anything there. Everything was gone. No tent, no cooler, nothing. The Dogman is a mystery that spans not only the state of Michigan and Wisconsin, but across much of the United States and throughout other countries. After researching the phenomena, I can't say for certain where the first Dogman sighting actually occurred. This is the kind of mystery that absolutely demands an open mind and a willingness to let go of any preconceived notions of what reality means to you. 2 episodes weren't enough to include everything that I wanted to cover on the Michigan Dogman. To be honest, it's a topic that will never have enough exposure. No amount of airtime or eyewitness accounts will satisfy my personal curiosity regarding this creature. If people really are seeing this animal, then what is it, and where did it come from? How long has it been here, and what are its intentions? I have endless questions about this cryptid, and if you're listening to this show, I assume that you all have similar questions. Maybe some of you even have a personal experience or encounter with the Dogman. If you do have a story or a question regarding today's topic, please email me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com. On our next show, we're going to continue our discussion on the Dogman, and we'll be talking with a guest about our own theories of what this creature could possibly be. We'll also discuss any listener stories that come in between now and then, so be sure to email me or comment below. Guys, I really appreciate you being here today. Our show is coming to a close. I want you guys to know that I do thank you for being patient. It's been a long time between episodes. Please leave any comments that you have below, and if you have any thoughts, like I said before, please feel free to email me. I would love to hear your own personal experiences with the Michigan Dogman. Again, my email address is paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can also get involved by joining our forum and by following us on social media. At Twitter, we are ParaMysteryPod. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so by visiting us over on patreon.com/paranormal mysteries. And don't forget that clicking the like, follow, and share buttons also helps to support the show. All new episodes of the show are available on your favorite podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Stay tuned for Steve Cook's original version of the legend coming up after the show. From all of us at Paranormal Mysteries, thanks for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.
So the officer and I went out there to take a look at it. You know, he just tried to chew in around the doors. And you could see a dog print, you know, alongside the window there. And so it was, you know, obviously a dog.
A cool summer morning in early June is when the legend began. At a nameless logging camp in Wexford County where the Manistee River ran. 11 lumberjacks near the Garland Swamp found an animal they thought was a dog. In a playful mood, they chased it around till it ran inside a hollow log. A logger named Johnson grabbed him a stick and poked around inside. Then the thing let out an unearthly scream and came out and stood upright. None of those men ever said very much about whatever happened then. They just packed up their belongings and left that night and were never heard from again. It was 10 years later in 97 when a farmer near Buckley was found. Slumped over his plow, his heart had stopped. There were dog tracks all around. 7 years past the turn of the century, they say a crazy old widow had a dream of dogs that circled her house at night. They walked like men and screamed. In 1917, a sheriff who was out walking found a driverless wagon and tracks in the dust like wolves had been stalking. Near the roadside, a 4-horse team lay dead with their eyes open wide. When the vet finished up his examination, he said it looked like they died of fright. In 37, a schooner captain said several crew members had reported a pack of wild dogs roaming Bowers Harbor. His story was never recorded. In 57, a man of the cloth found claw marks on an old church door. The newspaper said they'd been made by a dog. He'd have had to stood 7'4". In 67, a van load of hippies told a park ranger named Quinlan they'd been awakened in the night by a scratch at the window. There was a dogman looking in and grinning. In 77, there were screams in the night near the village of Bel Air. Could have been a bobcat, could have been the wind. Nobody looked up there. Then in the summer of 87, near Luther, it happened again. At a cabin in the woods, it looked like maybe someone had tried to break in. There were cuts around the doors that could only been made by very sharp teeth and claws. He didn't wear shoes because he didn't have feet. He walked on just 2 paws. So far this year, no stories have appeared. Have the dogmen gone away? Have they disappeared? Soon enough, I guess we'll know, because this is the time to fear. For another 10 years has come around. The 7th year is here. And somewhere in the Northwoods darkness, a creature walks upright. And the best advice you may ever get